Welcome to the Clearlywell Podcast. I'm Elizabeth McKeon, a board-certified psychiatric mental health and addiction recovery nurse. This podcast aims to bridge the gap between mental health and substance use discussions, fostering understanding and empathy while reducing stigma. Join us as we amplify the voices of those with lived experiences, creating a non-judgmental space for their stories to be heard. Thank you for tuning in. So let's rock and roll. Hey, this is Elizabeth McKeon with the Clearlywell Podcast. Good morning. I'm going to start off today with a did you know? So did you know that peer support specialists can have a significant impact on people in recovery, to include improved treatment outcomes for people with substance use disorder? It helps them increase adherence to treatment plans and reduce their substance use. It gives increased engagement through check-ins. It reduces relapse. It also improves housing stability. Criminal charges are reduced. It reduces anxiety and tension, and it gives access to social support, also reducing recidivism into detention centers and emergency departments. So that wraps up today's Did You Know? So good morning, guys. Welcome to the Clearlywell Podcast. I have a little cough today, so if I sound a little stuffy or whatever, it's the fall. You know, we're here in October 2024, so it's beautiful here in the Georgia mountains, and I've got allergies. So sorry for the sound being different today. I am here today with John Malley. John Malley is our guest today. Welcome, John.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, John, you know, a lot of times I know a little bit of background on the folks that I have on to the podcast, and I know very little about your background, although I do know that you're certified a peer support specialist and that you've worked in men's recovery. But before we go into all of that great success, I'm going to take you back. So let's talk about, let's start with your story, and I'd love to hear about what did childhood look like for you?
Okay, so I was born in Baltimore, Maryland in 1983 to a mother and a father. I ended up having three little sisters. They coming into the world, both of my parents suffered from the disease of addiction. My father, mainly alcoholism. My mother, just dual dependency. And
when you say dual dependency, can you clarify what that means?
Drugs and alcohol, both.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I spent bouncing around. My childhood spent bouncing around up until about 13. And then my father passed away in 96.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, he passed away from an overdose of heroin. He just recently got out of prison. The next day, he actually overdosed.
So I'm going to slow you down because you went from 0 to age 13 like real quick. And I am curious to know what you say. I bounced around a lot, and that can't be something that you can just really disregard, because if I had to think about that, that meant that, what did that mean as a child for you?
Well, my father, he was in and out of prison. So my mother, basically, wherever we could stay, you know, we basically stayed, family members, friends.
So you were homeless?
Yeah, we had a rough go of it.
I'm so sorry.
And
so you had to have like depression as a child?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Before I even realized what depression and addiction was, I ended up in both.
Yeah,
you know?
and you know, that's something that this podcast really addresses, is we want to bring mental health and addiction into one conversation, because you do not have one without the other. And I'm sorry, but physician practices and the world of my specialty, because you guys know I'm a psych and addiction nurse, we are all guilty of separating those two things and not looking at them as one and treating them together and cohesively. So I can recognize right off the bat that as a young child that you were probably very depressed.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I imagine my mother and father was too, the life, that they had ended up in.
Did they have, like, generationally, what about their parents?
From what I know, yeah. My grandfather, he suffered from alcoholism. It was basically split. My father's side was, suffered from all of it,
Yeah.
drugs, alcohol, mental health issues. And then my mother's side of the family, they was a more working type, and I don't really know of any of them that really went through alcoholism or drug addiction that I know of.
Okay. So maybe your mother fell into it possibly through
My
the
father.
relationship. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Which happens, right?
Absolutely.
The person that you love is doing whatever habit that they might be doing, and you love them, and that's how you spend time, right?
Absolutely. That's how it happens more than not.
So, okay, then thank you for going backwards for me. So now you're dealing with the death of your father at a very young teen age.
Yeah, 96, he overdosed. I'd come down to North Carolina, was staying with my aunt and uncle. He's in prison. He had got out and he called me and said he was out. Basically, this was like August the 22nd, I believe it was, in 96. And so I decided, I'd only been up there 5 months. I decided to go back and, and try to stay with him and my grandfather. So my grandfather left that night to come and get me. And before we got back to Maryland, he had already overdosed. It took us 2 weeks to find him. Yeah, so.
Oh no!
I feel like that kind of is the beginning of where I really dug in on the alcoholism, drug addiction, mental health issues. It kind of spiraled from that point there.
Well, I mean, that's understandable. That's just the roughest childhood of the stories that I've heard on the podcast. They're all the stories are hard to hear, but that's hard, and I'm sorry that you went through that.
Thank you.
So, okay, so we'll take it from now your dad has passed. It took you 2 weeks to find him, and I can't even imagine what the next step looks like for you.
Well, my grandfather, he was a man, he was money driven, basically, so he went ahead and jumped through the hoops in order to get temporary custody of me, which he was just living in a camper at the time, so he could collect, social services, social security checks or whatever for my father's passing. He got that established within, a few weeks, and then right after that, me and him had a falling out. I believe I was 13 or 14. We had a falling out, and he kicked me out immediately. So and as soon as the money was coming, he threw me out. So
Gosh, I can't even imagine that.
Yeah, it was rough.
I mean,
13,
Baltimore,
14.
you're just right butted up to Washington D.C. You're in the city.
Yeah, we was in the city for sure, and it wasn't the greatest area. And what happened? There was 3 brothers that lived right next to my grandfather. They was younger, like 21. There was 2 of them was twins, and then one of them was like 24. They sold crack cocaine. They lived right close to my grandfather, so he kicked me out in the middle of the night, and I ended up there with them, and they let me live with them. So I lived there for about a year, and in that time I learned to sell crack and hustle. And
You learned the hustle.
Learned to hustle with living with them brothers.
At 14.
At about 14, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so I went on from there, and, ended up getting in trouble, caught selling crack, went to juvenile institutions, 3 separate occasions, bounced all around the city.
What did the juvenile system look like there? I mean, how were you treated? What did that look like?
More like a boot camp for juveniles. I mean, it was tough. There was multiple different ones in Maryland, and
Did you feel like that toughness was appropriate?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, it wasn't the easiest place to be, so I imagine it probably been overrun if they didn't keep a good grasp on it.
That's okay. So that's good to hear. I always am curious about youth and how they're treated. And I feel like it's a good time at that transitional age between childhood and like true adulthood to like catch youth and try to reframe and rework their outcome or their success.
Yeah, it absolutely matters. I mean, You can live a whole lifetime of
and
bad choices.
And you and I will talk a little bit more about the juvenile and the judicial system and kind of what your and my focus is going to be later. But I just was curious about the juvenile part of that, what that looks like.
Yeah, it was through about 13 to 18. That's all I was all through it. In and out, just homeless, living here, living there. And then I ended up going back. What happened about 15 actually, I ended up getting back around with my mother. Like, she got out of a rehab. I went back staying with her, and I had been selling crack at the time, and I didn't do much. I drank and smoked pot, and but I started snorting heroin with her. She had a full-blown heroin addiction. So now, since I had the money, basically selling crack, she was broke. Her boyfriend and her would always try to get money from me, and so they give me. And now looking back at it, I kind of see what happened. Like, her addiction just had a hold of her, so she knew that was her way to get well every day, basically. So she would give me a line here, a line there. Asked me did I want anything. Her boyfriend was a runner. He would run in the city and get the heroin for other people. That's how they kind of made their way. So I started snorting heroin around 15 with them. Maybe I did that for 3-4 months, and then I hit the needle for the first time. And from that point. That's
hard. I've heard that first, I had a guest on the podcast that talked about he used to justify, well, at least I don't use needles. I'm only snorting or chewing or chewing up the pill or, snorting. But at least I'm not doing what that person's doing. So he talked about that too, that transition from going to the needle. It was less expensive, that felt amazing. So, I guess that is a huge transition when you switch to the needle.
Yeah, you tell yourself whatever you want to kind of numb the embarrassment of your, because everybody knows no matter what they're saying, they're just trying to dumb down how they're feeling inside, and it's a nasty feeling once you get that far gone. Even snorting it or taking the pills, nobody wants to be caught up in that cycle.
Right.
So you just do and say whatever you got to make yourself get through the day.
Yeah, I have been with a person who was addicted to opioids, and it's not a fun journey, I can tell you. And it changes a person's brain. It changes their temper. It changes their pain in their body. They have pain that they wouldn't otherwise have, and so they think they're in pain. They think that. And there's all this justification, right, of why you're doing it.
Yeah, and you suppress your own growth. Like, it's kind of just keeps you from progressing in any type of, positive way. It suppresses your growth. It kind of just, when you don't got it, you're chasing it. And then when you do got it, you're numb from everything going on. So it's just a walking, miserable.
Yeah, it's like The Walking Dead for sure.
Yeah.
Zombie.
Absolutely. So once I start, with the needle, everything went downhill from there. Like, I went from selling crack to doing absolutely stealing, robbing. Just, I really got out there, got dangerous. I didn't, like I said, in and out of the juvenile institutions. When I was 17, I ended up catching an armed robbery, home invasion charge that I went, and they was waving me up as an adult. Luckily, by the grace of God, I don't know why, but I ended up not having to do but just 11 months on that charge, and it was, and then then it brings me to about 18, and then I went to North Carolina. I kind of get away from it, try to get the city lifestyle. And then
where in North Carolina did you move to?
The Burnsville, like the western North Carolina mountains.
Okay.
Yeah, it's being torn apart, right?
Right, the Helene has really just, I used to live in Asheville, just a little break from what we're talking about so you can catch a breath, but I lived in Asheville 3 different times. I went to school at UNC Asheville as a freshman, and then multiple times after my daughter was born. I always loved it there. Beautiful area, easy access to the Parkway. Just been devastating. My niece lives there, and her whole area was washed away. And my sister-in-law and her husband couldn't find her They finally found her on that Saturday. Because there was no cell phone service. So our family was certainly affected on the Florida and North Carolina side. So I understand that that's just devastating to see what's going on there.
Absolutely is. Absolutely
yeah, and
is.
I know you had a personal experience actually with the flooding, and it was my understanding that you were in the Asheville area and basically lost your place to live.
Yeah. We lived in a campground, actually. It was a huge campground. It had, probably 100 campers there, and people were all set up. Well, it washed it off the face of the earth. It ain't even there no more. Now it's a river. So
I am so sorry.
And there's so many people displaced from it. Yeah, but my whole family is absolutely displaced from it. We're trying to pick up the pieces right now.
Oh my gosh, I just cannot imagine. So by the grace of God, you're on this podcast because you would not be here otherwise, sort of in refuge from the hurricane. So
absolutely, praise the Lord.
Yes, praise the Lord. Anyway, I'm glad you guys are okay because you have a family.
Yeah, I have a 6-month-old and a 9-year-old and my girlfriend. And
okay.
We're making it, though.
That's all right. If you're making it, you're making it. I'm sure you've got the help of family and friends. And
that's exactly what we got. Thank the Lord, her family. So, yeah, it's coming together, though.
That's good. That's good stuff. Yeah. So prayers going out to those affected by the hurricanes, both in even Georgia, we had some wipeout here. North Carolina, South Carolina's bad. I drove to Myrtle Beach a couple of weeks ago, 85, devastated. So people don't really fully know how magnanimous like the damage was, but it's bad. But praise the Lord that we're all getting through it.
Absolutely.
All right, so moving back.
Okay.
So we were basically. You are an adult now. You bypassed the incarceration at 17, and now you're 18 years old. You were talking about how you were basically trafficking the crack, and you're using with your mom now, and you did your first IV usage.
Yeah. So, yeah, and well, my mother had 3 more daughters. I had 3 little sisters, and then. While they was younger, when I was maybe 15, 16, they actually got took by social services. So my aunt from the Western North Carolina mountains came down and was able to get them out of foster care. That's how I ended up with the connection to Western North Carolina.
Okay.
So she got them and ended up taking them from my mom, but I was they was trying to get me too as well to put me in foster care, but I was already running the streets, and so they couldn't really catch me. So my aunt ended up with them. That's how I had that connection. But I was using, me and my mom, and basically I'm running all over the streets. I'm running wild, catching charges, in and out of juvenile facility. And then I came up, when I got out of from that armed robbery, home invasion charge, I came to the mountains to try to clean up and get my life together. And then I ran into the same mess up here. I just started using pain pills. Traded the heroin addiction because I couldn't find it up here. Started using pain pills and was here just a few months, and I caught another armed robbery and 3 kidnapping charges, and ended up in prison in North Carolina for like 7 years. Almost.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Wow. So that took a great part of your young life.
Yeah, almost all my 20s. So from like 18 to 27 I was in, and then that stretch right there, it sucked. It was a long time. So, but I did a lot while I was in there, schooling-wise, try to prepare myself for when I got out. And then when I got out, I was able to walk the path for a while. But that's
when you say I walked the good path for a while, how long do you think you made it?
7 years.
That's huge. That's so good because, when I hire folks to come on to the team for peer support, I like for them to have a good 2 years, which we feel like is a good start. So 7 years is huge.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, 7 years. I, worked, and got certified welder. I went to college and got certified.
Nice.
And worked for the same company. And I was with the same girl. So, and trying to tell my story is kind of sketchy, messing up, bouncing around a
You
little
are,
bit. Like,
and it's okay though, because it's your life was doing that. So
Yeah.
as you tell it, it's gonna bounce, and you're gonna, as we talk through it, you're gonna think of things. You're gonna be like, wait a minute, let's go back, and that's okay, because it just clarifies, like, oh, that's how you had that connection, or that's how that happened, and that's okay. We don't script anything on this podcast. I think, unlike most podcasts, is we don't practice. We don't have a script. You don't know what I'm going to ask you. You've not planned for this. And that's, I think, what makes this podcast so special and raw and real. And so it's okay to bounce around.
Yeah, so that's actually what just happened. Like, I bounced back right before I ended up having to go to prison in North Carolina. My girl I was with was pregnant.
Okay.
So now, and my son, he's 19 now, but when I went in the first 7 years of his life, yeah, we found out basically the same day we found out in the daytime she was pregnant. I'd already committed this stupid robbery the night before, and then they kicked my door in and locked me up. So
Okay.
he was born 9 months, like right at 9 months when I was in 9 months, and then my son popped. He came
And were
out.
you able to, like, visit with him during the time that you were incarcerated, or?
Not really. His grandmother, which is actually his great grandmother, brought him a couple times. It took they ship you all when you got a big sentence. They ship you all over the place. So
I didn't know that.
yeah, like I was in, I think, 14 different prisons on that.
Oh, good night.
That time. So I was moving so much, and I was far from home. But his great grandmother, she her wonderful lady, she brought him to see me a couple times. So like, which was a huge blessing. She was probably 75 by this time.
Oh,
so.
gosh. Now, do you have a relationship with him today?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, that's so good.
He's in college for welding right now.
Nice.
Yeah, he works full time. He just graduated high school. Like, he turned out to be an absolutely wonderful boy. So
You just have all the boys. You have a baby that's, what, 6 months old?
right at 6 months.
And then you have a 9-year-old
Stepson. He's my
stepson, and which I already know, treat like your own. And then you have a 19-year-old. So that's a big space, but you're blessed with 3 sons.
Beyond blessed. I'm beyond blessed. So, okay. So I got out of prison up here and got my life together for a while, worked for the same company about 7 years. And then me and the woman I was with, I was actually married to for 5 of those years. We separated. This was in 2018. So when we separated, I didn't have that restraint no more. Like, she had a little girl, and then the 7 years we was together, the little girl was like my own. So when we parted ways, she wouldn't let me see the little girl and everything. So I ended up right back ripping and running like I never lost a step.
You were devastated, probably.
Yeah, it wasn't the greatest time. And then I started back drinking, which I hadn't drank in a long time. Started back drinking, and then it didn't take long at all. And I was doing methamphetamine, and I never even tried it until 2018. And then.
So you went the other direction. You went from the downers to the uppers.
Yep, I sure did. My addiction didn't discriminate.
Yeah, so you like it all.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oddly, early in my career in substance use disorder, and even when I was working in ER psych and addiction, which is strange that exists, but it's basically where people can come into emergency department and you put them in a holding area while trying to get them placed for treatment. That's not in every emergency room, but I was fortunate to get to start one of those in Western North Carolina. But I had a lot of folks that would come in and tell me, desperately that they wanted to get clean off methamphetamine. What I found in North Carolina, and I don't know if this is true across the spectrum, but a lot of the treatment facilities wouldn't take meth as a primary usage because they would say that it's the hardest to get clean off of, and that, only a very small percentage can do that. I have learned since then, and that's been about 8 years ago, that that's not true. There's a much higher percentage of people that can get clean off methamphetamine than this, apparently the state of North Carolina understands.
Absolutely.
So you started using methamphetamine. What did that look like?
It was ugly.
As comparatively to using heroin and crack?
like the difference in it for me was it messes with my mental health. Like, and then the whole time I'm thinking that I'm normal and everything around me is messed up. Like, and it was, I couldn't even separate the difference, like what's for real and what's not real. And I went into usage of the worst kind. Like, I was doing as much as I could, every chance I got. That became my main goal, was just wake up and if I slept, just do drugs, drink, and I was just miserable. Depression hit me real hard, so I was just drowning in every chance I got.
Were you trying to get any treatment for your mental health, like depression, whatnot?
No. And
did you find that while using methamphetamine that you were paranoid?
Yes.
That is a symptom I see across the board with my patients, is like extreme paranoia, and very similar to like schizophrenic behavior, where to the point that my patients will see things that aren't there, and also think that it's a commonality that they think that there's some type of chip implanted somewhere in their body, or that they're being watched.
Exactly like schizophrenia.
Yeah.
It's the same exact symptoms. It's just drug-induced schizophrenia, basically.
It is, and sometimes it's hard to come back from, because it does affect the mesolimbic system in the brain, which is a changed brain syndrome. It actually affects the way the synapses in the brain affect each other. And so when you're looking at brain regrowth after stopping using drugs, you do get improvement, but there is some symptoms that don't recover. And sometimes with the methamphetamine usage over a long period of time, that paranoia does not go away.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
it's scary.
Yeah, it is scary. It's the devil's greatest tool, as far as I'm concerned.
I think that's a very good description and analogy.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're down deep in methamphetamine at this point.
I made it.
And
for
how
old
are you?
This is in 2018.
So, gosh, I feel like that's not that long ago.
Yeah, it wasn't actually. So I ended up drinking meth back on the, in and out. I ended up losing my place within a short amount of time, because when I left my wife, I went and got a townhouse. I lost my place, my 2 vehicles, everything I had within, say, a 5 or 6 month span, and was back in prison.
So you're not able to hold a job at this point?
No, absolutely not. Like, I worked for them 7 years for the welding company.
Yeah.
And then within 4 months of getting back in active addiction, I lost my job.
I feel like they don't offer a diversion program, or they would offer up treatment in order for you to keep your job. And that's something that I am a big proponent of. And, they do it for nurses. They do it for doctors. Why not do that for everybody? Actually right now in my job, the Healthy Georgia, we get referrals from the state of Georgia for nurses that need diversion. And that's treatment for them to go into get MAT while getting treatment, so that they can keep their nursing license and keep their job. And in my opinion, that disease process of addiction should be treated the same as any other disease. So would you fire someone for being a diabetic and missing work because they were sick?
Absolutely.
So it's the same concept, right? Like, if this person's willing to receive the treatment, do the work, let them keep their job.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I'm sorry that happened. And you may not have been in a place where you wanted to. So there's that part, because you have to be willing to do your side of that.
Yeah, that's a huge part of it. And won't get done without it. You got to definitely step it up.
You got to be ready.
You got to be ready. So after basically losing my entire life within a few months span, I ended up back in prison. I went back to prison for a burglary charge. It was a burglary and a larceny charge, and then I got a year. So in 2018.
And were you doing these burglaries in order to get money, or get things to be able to sell for money so you could buy drugs? Like, what was that about?
That's what it boiled down to.
Okay.
That's what it boiled down to.
Just clarification, because I see a pattern from youth to where you are today. Not today, but where you're stating you're around 2018. So from that young age of 14 to now, you're what age were you at 2018?
35. Maybe.
35, okay.
About 35, yeah. Yeah, that's where it goes, and it takes you down that road if you're not. I mean, somebody like me in active addiction is very dangerous and unpredictable, and the drug becomes more important than everything around me. So, yeah, it's not a good spot to be in. So in that little span there, I ended up back in prison for I think 10 months, 10 to 15 months or something like that. I got out, and then I went to a men's center, like a mission in McDowell County, North Carolina. And then I only made it 11 days, and I ended up right back in jail.
Wow.
Yeah, because in that time, within 30 minutes of getting out on parole, I'm just getting high, no desire to,
keep it up.
So I ended up in 2019 right back in prison. Went back in there for another 10 months. And then I got out, and then this time I was trying to actually make it work. Like in there, like the Lord changed my heart. I mean,
so was there like a pivotal moment on this last incarceration, or did you meet a person, or was there something that happened that made you say what you just said? Because you said, okay, now I'm ready to change. The Lord has changed me. There had to have been something.
Basically, yeah, there was. I ended up catching a bunch of charges, and my entire life I was, in active addiction, suffered from alcoholism. I never had times that I really couldn't truly remember, like, what happened. Like, and this time here, the charges that I caught and everything that went down, I could not remember. Like, I woke up in jail, and I had to ask them what I was there for and what my charges was. And that right there just scared me. Like,
yeah.
Because I got violent that night. Things, could have went a lot worse than they actually did. And but just the lack of memory, and I still don't remember. Like I was like, I can't keep walking this, And
right.
I've always had, my heart's always been in the right place, but I let the addiction overpower my intentions. And at this point here, like, just having that experience, waking up and having to beat on the door and ask, like, what am I in here for?
Yeah, that must have been just scary.
Scary. Can't even explain how.
Yeah.
Scary it was, and plus I was beat half to death. I had knots all over me, so I woke up in a turtle suit, basically naked in the green suit, and with no idea what happened. So
that's a big blackout.
Yeah, and that was the change. That
and
was the beginning.
Do you know what you used that night that caused that type of blackout, or was it just that much alcohol, or
being up for a long period, and then on top of a bunch of alcohol, on top of just drugs, all together, exhaustion.
One thing we used to see a lot in the emergency department with our methamphetamine usage is a lot of muscle. So the dehydration, like, basically, I won't use the medical terminology because you won't understand it. Because it was, even as a nurse, the first time I heard the word, I was like, what is that? But yeah, so it basically causes so much dehydration in the body over being awake and not drinking any water that the muscles actually contract to a point that you're in big trouble.
I could have been at that point. Very well could have. Like, it was just unbelievable. I was in a bad spot. Like, I wasn't eating right, wasn't drinking, just nothing but alcohol, probably just running the streets. I actually overdosed the night before that for the first time in my entire life. I did fentanyl, and it about killed me if it wasn't for this girl there giving me Narcan.
And the Narcan, yeah.
Saved my life. Like, yep. And then that very next night, I ended up, that's when I caught all the charges and ended up in jail and didn't even know what I was there for.
So that might have been like a double whammy. Like, I almost died, now I don't remember, and I'm beat half to death. And so in 2 days, 48 hours, you had two major...
Absolutely.
That affect your life, right? Like, it's... Okay, guys, so we're out of time in episode 1 of John Malley. John, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate it. And we will be having you back in studio for episode 2. So, audience, please stay tuned for episode 2 of John Malley. Thank you. So, as I wrap up today's introductory podcast, I want to state that please do not substitute this podcast for professional therapy or treatment. The content shared here is for informational and entertainment purposes only. We do ask our listeners to respect the diverse experiences of individuals and refrain from passing judgment. If you or someone you know needs professional help, please seek the guidance of a registered and qualified mental health professional. Clearlywell is brought to you by Healthy Georgia and produced by CNC Media.